I wish I could tell you I didn't feel anything when his hand brushed against mine that day. But the truth is, it was like the world went silent. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the rain tapping softly against the window behind him, his lamp casting a warm glow across the dark wood shelves filled with psychology books I had pretended to scan to avoid looking at him too long. We had been talking about loneliness. How I'd been waking up in the middle of the night, my chest heavy, reaching for someone who wasn't there. His voice had always been steady, low, careful, like every word was weighed before it touched me. I told him that day that I hated how empty my apartment felt. How I felt like a ghost in my own life. I don't know why I said it, but I told him I wanted someone to see me, really see me, not just as a patient, not just as a set of broken pieces. I was wiping tears I didn't want him to see when his hand found mine. I thought it was just a moment of comfort. I thought it was professional empathy, the way he had explained in the intake paperwork when I first came in, that boundaries would keep me safe. But his thumb moved. Just once, tracing the side of my hand. And I felt heat rush so quickly through me that it almost scared me. He didn't move away immediately. His eyes were on mine, dark, steady, but there was something unspoken in them, something that made me swallow hard, something that made me want to close the small space between us. He cleared his throat, pulling his hand back, the softness of the moment turning into a heavy silence between us. I looked away, pretending to scribble in the tiny notebook I kept in my bag, but my hand was still tingling where his skin had touched mine. I wish I could tell you that I left that day and forgot about it. But that touch lived under my skin, humming like a secret I was too afraid to say out loud. And when I lay in bed that night, alone, the memory of his thumb on my hand was the only warmth I had. The next session, I tried to act like nothing happened. I sat on the same couch, arms wrapped around a pillow, pretending to listen to the tick of the clock on the shelf behind him. But I could feel him, the way you can feel warmth before you even see the sun. Every time I glanced up, his eyes met mine for a second too long, then flickered away, like we were both pretending we didn't remember how his hand had lingered. He asked me how I'd been sleeping. I told him I wasn't sure if I wanted to sleep anymore because at least at night I could pretend there was someone breathing beside me, someone whose warmth I could almost feel if I pressed hard enough into the mattress. I didn't say it was him I was imagining. His pen paused on his notepad and the silence grew thick, like the air was holding its breath for us. I could feel something in my chest tightening, pulling me toward him in a way that felt wrong but alive. You don't have to be alone with it, he said, his voice softer than usual. But we both knew I was alone. Because he wasn't supposed to be anything but a man with a notebook, a quiet voice in a room that smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. I tried to change the subject, asking him if it was normal to want to be touched, even if you didn't deserve it. His eyes darkened for just a moment, and he shifted in his chair, as if he was trying to put a wall back up that had already cracked. Everyone needs connection, he said, but there was a tension in the way he gripped his pen, the way his knuckles turned white, the way he didn't look at me when he said it. It was such a small moment, but it was the first time I realized he was struggling too. That maybe he wasn't just seeing me as a patient. When I stood up to leave, I lingered near the door, my hand on the knob, waiting. I don't know what I was waiting for, maybe for him to tell me to stay, maybe for him to say anything that would break the line we weren't supposed to cross. Instead, he just said, "Take care of yourself, okay?" But his voice cracked a little on the last word. I walked out, but the space between us wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with the warmth of a single touch and the quiet, dangerous promise of something neither of us was ready to admit. It was raining again when I walked into his office the next week, the smell of wet asphalt clinging to me, my hair dripping onto the collar of my sweater. He offered me a towel, and when his fingers brushed mine as I took it, it was like a small jolt shot up my arm. I saw it in his eyes too. That hesitation. That almost invisible moment when we both remembered. I sat down, curling into the corner of the couch, clutching the towel like it was the only thing holding me together. I tried to talk about work, about the empty dinners I ate in front of the TV, about how I had woken up in the middle of the night again with tears I couldn't explain. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, listening in that way that made me feel like nothing else existed outside that room. I watched the way his throat moved when he swallowed, the way his eyes softened when I paused, searching for words I didn't know how to say. "I don't want to feel alone anymore," I whispered. I saw his jaw tighten, his breath catching for just a second. His hand moved toward mine, then stopped, hovering in the space between us. And I did something I shouldn't have done. I reached out and closed the space, letting my hand slip into his slowly, like I was afraid it would shatter the world around us. His hand was warm, and I could feel a faint tremble in his fingers as they closed around mine. We sat like that for what felt like forever. The rain tapping on the windows, the clock ticking, my pulse so loud I thought he could hear it. I watched his thumb brush over my knuckles, slow, careful, like he was memorizing the shape of me without even looking. His eyes lifted to mine, and I could see it there, the storm he was trying to hold back, the conflict in every shallow breath he took. "This isn't safe," he whispered, but his hand didn't let go. I felt heat rising in my chest, an ache that made it hard to breathe. My body leaned forward before I could stop it, closing that last inch between us, my forehead almost touching his. His breath hitched and I could feel it against my lips, warm, hesitant like a secret. I wanted to pull away. I wanted to do the right thing. But his hand tightened around mine, and in that moment, nothing felt more right than the way we were breaking. I let my hand stay, and in the space between heartbeats, I let myself believe that maybe he wanted this as much as I did. That moment should have ended. But it didn't. His forehead rested against mine, the space so small between us that I could feel the warmth of each breath we tried to hold back. The rain outside softened into a hush, like the world was leaning in to listen to us break. His thumb traced a slow, trembling line over the back of my hand, and I felt a shiver roll through me so hard I almost pulled away. But I didn't. I couldn't. I was so tired of pulling away from everything that made me feel alive. "I can't," he whispered, but the way his hand tightened around mine told a different story. "I know," I whispered back, closing my eyes, letting the closeness be enough even if it hurt. I felt his breath against my cheek, warm, careful, hesitant. Every inhale was like a promise we weren't supposed to make. Every exhale a silent confession that we were already too far gone. His other hand lifted, hovering near my face, close enough that I could feel the heat of it without him even touching me. I opened my eyes, and the way he looked at me, like he was searching for permission and forgiveness all at once, made something deep inside me ache. When his fingers finally brushed my hair back from my face, it was so gentle that I had to bite down on my lip to keep from gasping. His touch was a whisper, but it felt like a thunderstorm in my veins. I saw him close his eyes, and I felt him exhale shakily, like he was letting go of something he had held onto for too long. "We shouldn't," he breathed, but his thumb was tracing circles on my cheek now, his forehead pressing more firmly against mine. And I felt it then, the tension between us tight and electric, the space between us vibrating with everything we weren't saying. My hand found the sleeve of his shirt, clutching it, grounding myself in the fabric, in the warmth of him, in the reality that for once, I wasn't alone in wanting something I wasn't supposed to want. I could feel my heart hammering, the pulse in my throat so strong I thought it would choke me. My breathing came in small, careful tremors, matching the way his chest moved against mine, so close, so careful. "I know," I whispered again. And for a moment, in the hush of that small office, I let myself believe that maybe it was okay to want something you couldn't have. That maybe wanting it was proof that I was still alive. The next time I saw him, I swore I would keep my distance. I wore my hair up, thinking maybe it would make me feel stronger, more in control. But when I sat on the couch, the scent of his cologne in the warm air between us, I felt every careful barrier I had built begin to crumble. We pretended it was just another session. He asked about my sleep, my fear of being alone, the restless nights that left me clutching the sheets, longing for a warmth I couldn't name. I answered, but my eyes kept drifting to the way his hand held his pen, the way his shirt shifted with each breath, the way he looked at me like he was memorizing every small movement. At one point I laughed nervously, brushing away a tear I didn't realize had fallen. Without thinking, I reached across the small coffee table, my fingers brushing his wrist. I felt it then. The stillness. He didn't pull away. His hand turned slowly, and his fingers closed around mine. Warm. Careful. His thumb brushed the inside of my wrist, and I sucked in a breath, feeling my pulse jump beneath his touch. "We can't," he started. But the words faded into the hush between us. I don't know who moved first. Maybe it was both of us, leaning forward, pulled by something we could no longer pretend wasn't there. My hand slipped up to his chest, feeling the rapid thump of his heart beneath the thin fabric of his shirt. He was breathing hard, and when I looked up, his eyes were on mine, dark, questioning, afraid, wanting. I felt the air shift, warm and heavy. His forehead dropped to mine, and for a moment we just breathed together, trembling, holding on to the thin thread of control we both knew we would lose. His hand came up to my jaw, fingers brushing so softly that it felt like a sigh against my skin. My eyes fluttered shut, and for a moment, there was nothing but the warmth of him. The way the world fell away in that tiny room. The way it felt to be seen, fully, terrifyingly seen. "Please," I whispered, though I didn't know what I was asking for. His thumb traced the line of my lower lip, and I felt my breath catch, my body leaning into the warmth of his touch. The moment stretched, holding us in that suspended place where we had forgotten the rules, where we were nothing but two people who needed each other more than we wanted to admit. And then slowly, so slowly, he pressed his lips to my forehead, letting them linger, letting me feel the heat of him, the quiet desperation in the way he exhaled. It wasn't a kiss, but it was enough to undo me. I pressed my hand over his, closing my eyes, letting the warmth sink in, letting the trembling quiet between us say everything we were too afraid to speak. And in that moment I knew there was no going back. I wish I could say it ended there, that I pulled away and saved us both. But the truth is I leaned in. I don't remember making the decision. I just remember the warmth of his breath on my skin, the way his hand was still on my jaw, the way my body was humming with something that felt like both fear and freedom. I opened my eyes and he was right there, his gaze searching mine like he was looking for a reason to stop. I could see it, the storm, the guilt, the wanting, and it made something deep inside me ache. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. But his thumb was brushing over my cheek, soft, tender, like he was already saying goodbye to the part of himself that could still walk away. I couldn't speak. I was breathing too hard, my chest rising and falling against his, the space between us gone, the world narrowing down to the heat of our bodies pressed close, the silence that felt like it was holding us together. When his lips finally touched mine, it was so gentle I almost didn't feel it. Almost. It was a soft, trembling kiss, the kind that tasted like hesitation and hidden longing, like an apology wrapped in a promise we weren't ready to make. His hand slid into my hair, holding me there, and I let out a small broken sound that I couldn't control. His other hand was on my back, pulling me closer, until I could feel every shaky breath, every heartbeat, every unspoken word that passed between us. I pressed into him, feeling the warmth of him, the way his body curved into mine like it was instinct, like we had been waiting for this without even knowing. When we pulled back, our foreheads touched, and we were both breathing hard, our eyes closed, like we couldn't bear to see the truth in each other's faces. "This can't happen," he whispered, but his thumb was still tracing the line of my lip, catching the warmth there. "I know," I whispered, but my hand was clutching his shirt, refusing to let go. We sat there, wrapped around each other in a moment that felt stolen, dangerous, and perfect all at once. I could feel the heat of him, the tension in his shoulders, the quiet shiver in the way he exhaled against my cheek. It was wrong, but it was the first time in a long time that I felt seen, alive, wanted. When I finally stepped back, my fingers sliding down his arm until they slipped from his hand, I looked at him, and for a moment he looked back at me like I was more than just a patient. And in the silence that followed, I didn't realize that the small blinking red light on the shelf behind me had been on the entire time. Watching. Recording. Listening to every breath. Every whispered confession. I thought that moment was the most vulnerable I could ever feel. But the real confession came later. I was in bed, the sheets tangled around me, the memory of his touch still alive on my skin, my lips still warm from that trembling, stolen kiss. I replayed it in my mind over and over, the way he looked at me like I was more than broken, the way he whispered, "This can't happen," while letting it happen anyway. I didn't know that while I was lying there in the dark, he was listening to me. To us. It was an accident that I found out, or maybe it wasn't. I was early for a session, the door slightly open, the soft glow of the lamp spilling into the hallway. I heard my own voice, quiet, shaky, telling him I didn't want to be alone anymore. I froze. I heard his voice too, low, softer than I remembered, whispering things I knew he would never say to me out loud. "God, I can't stop thinking about you," he breathed into the empty room. There was a crackle of movement, the sound of the leather chair shifting, the faint, intimate sound of him exhaling like he was confessing his sins to the dark. "I shouldn't have touched you," he whispered, "but I can't stop wanting to." I pressed my hand to my mouth, my heart slamming so hard I thought I would collapse. I should have turned and left, but I stepped closer, drawn to the soft glow, to the brokenness in his voice, to the proof that what happened between us wasn't just in my head. I peeked inside. He was sitting there, headphones in, eyes closed, listening to our sessions, listening to me like I was the only thing that mattered. His hand was pressed over his lips, his shoulders shaking like he was fighting something inside himself. And for a moment I didn't feel angry. I felt wanted. Seen. I slipped away quietly, the sound of my own laughter and tears playing from the tiny speaker I could barely see, leaving him with the ghost of me that he kept replaying at night. I never asked him why he recorded me. And he never told me why he needed to hear my voice when the room was empty. Maybe it was wrong. But some nights, when I can't sleep, I close my eyes and imagine him there in that small, quiet room, listening to my confessions over and over, like I was the secret he could never let go.